What is happening in the Sahel with Burkina, with Niger, with Mali is unprecedented. We have young people who have gotten into power through extraordinary means, which are understandable. And they are saying that our resources must now be used for the benefit of our people. And that is the way to go.
This is the journey to one Africa.
Jim Choge came to my office and gave me documents. Those documents had details of where toxic waste was being dumped in Kenya. In my stupidity, I took those documents and went and confronted President William Ruto. And I told him, Zé, I have information. The people in the Ministry of Energy, they are cheating Kenyans that they are looking for oil, but this is toxic waste that is being dumped in northeastern and around that area. I've never been in trouble like that because I was asked, where did you get these documents? And if you don't say where you got these documents, it's the end of you. Where did you get these documents? So I said, Mzee, you said, we must always keep secret the source of our information.
Yes.
Welcome to another episode of Savage Politics. Today, our guest is none other than Professor PLO Lumumba, a Pan-Africanist, a lawyer, a man of letters. You can call Professor Lumumba anything. There's nothing he has not done. Welcome, Professor Lumumba.
Thank you very much, Cyrus.
Yes.
I'm glad to have this conversation with you. And I have no doubt in my mind that the conversation will add value to the ongoing discourse on the continent of Africa and, by extension, human affairs.
Thank you very much. Most welcome.
Thank you.
Professor Lumumba, you've tried politics some time back, and I believe clearly you had an agenda. Thereafter, you decided, I'll pursue this agenda, whether I got into active politics or not. And your videos, your engagements on leadership in Africa has been watched and listened to by very many people. We are here in Kenya. This is the scene of crime, where the action is taking place.
Yes.
So Kibaki once said that leadership is a privilege to serve others.
Correct.
It is not an opportunity to satisfy personal greed.
Yes.
And looking at the regimes we have had from Kenyatta, President Moi, Kibaki, Uhuru Kenyatta, and now William Ruto, regime by regime, if you can, of course you have been there when all these regimes were there, you've been there. There are others, maybe you are still young, but you read about them deeply. You are a good student of history, despite the fact that you are a lawyer. If you can do an analysis for the viewer, so that maybe in the process of analyzing, the viewer can easily see where did we start losing it.
You know, Cyrus, you are so right, and I can't agree with you more. That when President Mwai Kibaki spoke about leadership, he was right on target. Leadership is a place of honor and privilege. The very reason why we call our elected officials honorable is because we have honored them to serve. And when one looks at the different administrations that we have had since Kenya regained independence, you can see that in the very early days, leadership was sacrificial. The men and women who served in the first parliament from 1963, one can say, way up to 1965, if you look at the remuneration that they received, if you look at their lifestyles, if you look at their conviction and the laws that they enacted, they were interested in ensuring that the quality of people's lives was improved, whether it was health, whether it was in education, whether it was in agriculture, whether it was in the provision of infrastructure. Leadership was truly an opportunity to serve. Then some bugs started biting us. And historically, I always want to identify the place where the rain started beating us with the Ndegwa Commission, the Duncan Ndegwa Commission. Because you remember, in those early days, when one was an active politician, you are not allowed to participate in business, because the business of service is a full-time business. But then the Ndegwa Commission said that you could be a politician and participate in politics, or rather participate in business. And what then happened is that immediately people started getting into the political arena for the wrong reason. And that begins in earnest in the election after 1969. And it is obvious when you look at the different sectors of the economy. If you look at some of the richest families in this country, they are to be found in the banking sector. They are to be found in agriculture. They are to be found in education, because by virtue of being in government, they knew ahead of time what the priorities of government were. And they would have members of their family who are outside of active politics to incorporate companies in the banking sector, in the insurance sector, in the education sector, so that the motivation for getting into politics was no longer service, but to have easy access to the resources of the nation. And that was not only restricted to politicians, it was also, it extended even to senior public civil servants, whether they were permanent secretaries or provincial administrators. And to date, these are some of the richest individuals that this country has ever produced, and continue to produce, with their children, of course, now ruling the roost. When President Moi came into power, things did not change. Things, in my view, even assumed a much more injurious impact on the Kenyan economy and on Kenyan politics. Joining politics no longer was an easy thing. You have to have resources. You've got to have money. You've got to have these things that the people had then been introduced into. The people are then told that if you want to vote, we'll give you money. And if you have millions, then you could buy the voters. So the Moi administration sees the emergence of what I call the political millionaires and political billionaires. So that the distinction between politics for service and politics for business disappears. And I think that is what was then inherited by the Uhuru administration. That is what is inherited by the William Ruto administration. Today, the shortest avenue to wealth is to be a politician. If you are a lawyer, you join politics so that you can improve your law practice. If you are an engineer, you join politics so that you can get government tenders. If you are a quantity surveyor, you do the same thing. So that you are purely bred professional who is not in the political arena is now forced to compete with politicians who are fundamentally businessmen. And that, I think, is a bad thing. It is a bad thing because ultimately you get the wrong people joining the political arena. I remember in the year 2007 when I personally thought that beyond simply complaining about things, let us get into the political arena, let us get there and begin to participate by formulating legislation that would help the manner in which we govern our country. I held 250 town hall meetings with people in the constituency of choice, But on the day of the voting, what happened is that voters were registered elsewhere and were imported into the constituency, so that you are campaigning amongst people who are not even your voters. Mm-hmm. And this is why I then wrote a small book, A Call for Political Hygiene in Kenya. I said that there is no hygiene in Kenyan politics. And that is why the people that get attracted to politics are some of the individuals whom we don't have very good things to say about. Yes. And the electorate, for some reason, is also attracted to those individuals. I remember a friend of mine telling me, he said I was going to contest in a constituency somewhere in Western Province. And the people told him, no, we know what you want to tell us. You give us the money, we'll decide whether to vote for you or not. So we have had a very unfortunate history, and I believe, and I hold the view, that every election cycle we are getting deeper and deeper into the muck and mire of confusion, coupled, of course, with ethnicity, which we use to manipulate the population, and corruption. We are not in a good space, Cyrus.
If I get you well,
yes,
it is politics that is driving business, not business driving politics.
You've summarized it so very well.
It is politics that drives ethnicity and exclusion.
Yes.
And that is the dilemma we find ourselves in.
In fact, it is bad politics. He says that when politics stumbles, the country pays. Because if we were to define politics, politics is the organization of human affairs for the benefit of the people. If politics is organized for the benefit of those whom we describe as leaders to the detriment of the people, then we pay. And it drives us in the wrong direction. We are mobilized ethnically. We are mobilized because we have been given money. We are mobilized for the wrong reasons. And ultimately, the things that we want the political class to deliver for us using our hard-earned taxes are not delivered. Today, Cyrus, you and me know, the richest individuals in this country are those who are in active politics. We know them. We know their salaries. They have not won any lottery. They have not made any major discovery. How do they become rich?
They can't show you a shop.
They can't show you a shop. They are seldom in parliament to debate critical issues, yet they are multi-billionaires. What trick do they use other than influence peddling and using office for personal benefit?
We've had very many issues and tried to use the law to address the problems that we've had. Previously, the Constitution was blamed. We have made those changes in the Constitution. I'm yet to really see what really tangible benefits any Kenyan can say he's taking at home because we have a new Constitution in place. During independence,
yes.
If you look at the factories that were started in this country, Kikomi, the sugar factories, literally everywhere, coffee milling, KPCU, and all those things. It is not because they had the new constitution that we have, but it's because we had men and women with a will to develop their country and create employment. Today, the most dangerous thing in our nation is unemployment. Not that the leadership is not awake to it, but it looks like those that go into leadership, as you have clearly said, they go there for another purpose other than serving. They go there to be served. What is this that we can do to get the brain in Africa, the brain in Kenya, to wake up to the challenge and remove the economic power from the political hands into institutions that provide wealth, provide taxes, provide employment.
You know, Cyrus, if you look at Kenya, in terms of human resource, we have some of the best human resource anywhere in the continent of Africa. You go to different countries in the region, whether it's in the hotel industry, whether it's in the ICT industry, across the continent of Africa and outside, you'll find Kenyans. And you've given a very good summary. If you look at the area of agriculture, there was a time when we had the chain that took you from the factory to the farmer. And the cooperatives, and Kenya has one of the strongest cooperative movements in the continent of Africa and indeed in the world. If you go into floriculture, if you go into horticulture, you would find that Kenya was adding value in tea, in coffee, and those areas. And you've talked about the other resources, natural resource, whether it's gold, whether it is cobalt, whether it's soda ash. We have all those within Kenya and, of course, the continent of Africa. But having resources without being resourceful is a totally different big thing. You can have resources, but you are not resourceful. You can have cotton, but you still import second-hand clothing. You can have coffee, but you are still importing Nescafe from Nestle. You can have cows and milk, but you are still importing butter. You can have leather and you can't turn leather. You are still importing shoes from Italy. Yes. You can have timber and bamboo and you are still importing toothpicks from China. What is it that we must do? The environment must be enabling. You must have policies that allow for the formulation of laws, and you yourself were a government minister and legislator of long standing, and you know, when you create a favorable environment where business people can come, make money, utilize some for creating opportunities for young men and women, and then they take their money wherever they want to take it, and then they will come. If you have an environment where there is a tax-friendly environment, if you tax people, and we are having this conversation at a time when quite a number of business people in Kenya are leaving. They are leaving because the cost of production has become too high. The cost of the thing that you need for purposes of production have become too high. The cost of electricity is too high. So Kenya is sending a message that what we are saying with our mouths is not what we are doing in the environment to enable. And I'll give you an example of a country which has, in my view, achieved major strides in the continent of Africa in the last 15 years, Mauritius. Today, every person, including in Kenya, wants to have an address in Port Louis. What did they do? They were in the sugar business. They had sugar factories. They said, we don't have comparative advantage in the production of sugar. We are going to be the financial mecca for the rest of Africa. Today, they are doing exactly that. And I believe that we must, in the nature of things, allow our environment, in the legal environment, dispute resolution environment, and factors of production must be affordable. The ease with which we move money must allow us to attract investors who also invest in the environment. Today, we are exporting labor. And the kind of labor that we are exporting, those who go there, who are attracted to Europe and America, in the IT sector, in the medical sector, we produce and then donate our final product. Then we are producing labor at a very low level, house helps to go to Kuwait or Saudi Arabia. Yet, if we organize ourselves properly within the continent of Africa, we can actually generate opportunities by value addition to the products you are talking about. Let us not export all the coffee we produce. Let us move from the market to the supermarket, from the farm to the supermarket. Let us create an enabling environment. And once we do that, then the people will know that we are ready to do business. During your lifetime and my lifetime, we have seen Dubai do what they are doing. We have seen Korea do what they are doing. In the more recent past, I don't want to talk about China. We have seen Vietnam after the war in 1975. We have seen what the Bangladeshi are doing in the textile sector. We have seen what Cambodia and Laos. Why can't Kenya do it? Why can't Tanzania do it? Why can't the Democratic Republic of Congo do it? Why can't Sudan do it? Why can't Somalia do it? Why can't Ethiopia do it? So, in a nutshell, I think that the role of a political administration is to create an environment that creates an atmosphere which gives the oxygen that allows innovators and inventors and business people to create and implement, and then they will flock to your country.
Very well put. Professor, looking at our current scenario, particularly in our own Republic, Kenya, and looking at the way things are happening, and having the understanding that we both have that the potential of our country is great, and that God blessed this country with the people who are hardworking, people who take education seriously, meaning they understand their environment even better. What is this that the common voter needs to look at when they're choosing their leader?
You know, Cyrus, you asked a question which I did not answer, but I'm now answering. You talked about a constitution, and you were there when in the year 1990s toward the end, we thought that with a new constitution, all our problems will disappear. So we went there, we went for the new constitution. Of course, we defeated the other one in 2005. Then we had the constitution of Kenya 2010. And we thought now, with devolution, everything is going to be perfect. What we have succeeded in doing, of course, there are some gains, but we have succeeded in devolving bad manners. And I can't agree more with my good friend Moisa Kitui when he says that political bad manners cannot be cured through constitution.
Sure.
We must create a culture where the law is simply an avenue that allows us to walk to our destination. So the voter must be empowered. And how do we empower the voter? There is something we call civic education.
Yes.
And it has its value. It has its value because it enables and empowers the voter to ask. If you are an MCA, as we now call councillors, and I remember when I grew up both here in Nairobi in my rural area, the councillor lived with you. The councillor participated with you. The councillor was the person who midwifed what needed to be done for the communities. And you can travel across Kenya and you can see the work that they undertook, and undertook in a very diligent manner. So the voter must now begin to ask, this individual that I'm giving the honor and the privilege to serve, what is he or she going to do to ensure, number one, that if I earn 100 shillings, I will contribute a portion of it to do my roads, a portion of it to do my education, a portion of it to do with my health, a portion of it to create security, but the bulk of it is left to me to enjoy for purposes of self-development. The voter must ask those relevant questions. But as it is now, the Kenyan voter has almost surrendered to the situation by saying, we are sending him or her to the National Assembly, or him or her to the office of the president, or him or her to the devolved units, and we know that he or she will do nothing for us, and therefore let us milk him or her before he goes, then we'll milk him or her again after 5 years. We must change that. And we can only change that by making demands. It has been done by ensuring that our people suffer pain if they misbehave. And there are now avenues. When people are dissatisfied with their political leaders, I want to see them collecting signatures to impeach these individuals so that they send a message. Even if they are not impeached, they will know that the people are dissatisfied. And these are the avenues that have been followed by other people in different countries over the years. And that is how the political class begins to know that we are no longer leading people who do not know what they want, but we are leading people who know what they want, and they'll punish us if we don't behave. Look at what we are doing now. There is a sense in which the political class almost assume that they are leading a bunch of fools who don't know what they want, a bunch of fools who must be told what to do, a bunch of fools who can be led like sheep to the slaughter. We must have a political class that respects the electorate, and the electorate can demand that they be respected by sending clear messages, and there is no shortage of avenues now to send those clear messages to political leadership.
It sounds to me, the way you talk about the ability of Kenyans, well-educated, most of them jobless, it sounds to me, and it's true, that the biggest investment this country has ever made is in educating its people, right from independence up to today. And if you remember, Kibaki came and actually said, let's have free education. Because it is in understanding your environment that you become resourceful to change the resources that are within to produce wealth, which gives you comfort. The biggest investment is turning to be the curse of the country. The people who take leadership in this country are people who have gone to school. What is this cultural change that took place from the original dignified leadership that we had at independence to now all riffraffs taking leadership positions? And they come with a story. The Kenyan has submitted. He has said, okay, fine, give me mine today, I eat. After all, I'm sending you there to loot.
There is no one drug that we can prescribe to solve this problem. It must be a cocktail of drugs.
Yes.
I remember nearly 20 years ago, and you were there at that time, there was the Akiumi Commission,
yes,
that was put together to look at the terms and conditions of members of parliament. I appeared before it. And I remember saying the following things. Don't increase the salaries of people's representatives so that they are like officers in the corporate world.
Yes.
You'll begin to attract people for the wrong reasons. Don't make the occupation of political offices like they are permanent and pensionable. Ensure that those who join politics are individuals who are prepared to sacrifice, and during the entire period that they are actively in politics, they should not participate in any business. Their resources and their wealth should be kept in a trust so that we are able to know what they acquired after they got into politics as opposed to what they had before. Of course, that was ignored. And today, being a politician is one of the most lucrative jobs in Kenya. I think relative to our GDP, the Kenyan politician is one of the best paid in the world. So that an MCA earns more than a doctor, and a member of parliament earns more than a professor of medicine or engineering or law. That is the reality. The net effect is that you attract people into politics for the wrong reason, and yet there is very little work to be done. We have in Kenya also introduced something called the CDF. And if you go to the CDF, there are things that have been done, it's taxpayers' money. But if you are to examine each one of the constituencies, you'll discover that members of parliament have possibly incorporated 10 or 20 companies through their friends and relatives who are doing business with their constituencies or with their wards. And that in itself is part of the problem, which begs the question, how can we change this political culture? It is not going to be easy. You talked about education, but let us ask ourselves what kind of education. A Nigerian musician called Fela Anikulapo Kuti once sang, "Teacher, don't teach me nonsense." Perhaps we have not been teaching people the thing that they ought to be taught. You've got to ask ourselves, when we take our young men and women to school in agriculture, what are we teaching them? In the early 70s and in the 1980s, when we had the Butula Institute of Agriculture, the Egerton University, the products of those institutions were world-class. The Utali College, world-class. The students who came from the polytechnics, world-class. Then we went into an era where we were dishing certificates. So that there is also something that has happened in Kenya, that we now have institutions of learning which have become certificate issuing institutions, and there is no content. That is not to take away the fact that they are very well educated Kenyans who are doing great job and are capable of doing great work. But there is no more dangerous thing in a country than to have a people who have acquired formal education without culture and without decency. This is what we need. Who defines a Kenyan? Who is a Kenyan? When we say, for example, in Kiswahili, najivunia kuwa Mkenya. Unajivunia kwa nini? Wewe ni nani? What are the taboos? What are the ideals that you stand for? And if you are a true Kenyan, what you stand for, they say, is the pursuit of material wealth. And we celebrate material wealth. In my view, one of the things that we must do as a people is to begin to punish those who engage in conduct that is harmful to the society. You have seen in the recent past, for example, what has been happening with people who are charged with corruption. All cases against them are withdrawn, which means that it's cool to be corrupt. It is cool to acquire wealth. It doesn't matter as long as you have it. And it's going to take leadership. And leadership comes from the top. The message from the top and the action from the top must be clear and unequivocal. Samaki huoza kutoka kichwani. And if we don't solve that, it is the duty of a head of state of any country, including Kenya, to send a clear message that in my administration, if you are a thief, you will not serve under me. In my administration, if you have wealth whose source you cannot explain, you will not serve under me. If you want to be in my administration, you must be a man and a woman who can stand on the pulpit or on the podium and swear by your life that you'll do that which is right and good for the benefit of the society. I want to see a Kenya where people's properties are seized and put into a national fund because they acquired that property improperly. We are only slightly over 60 years. We can do that. It has been done before. Countries that we admire, such as China, if you engage in unethical behavior, they behead you. I'm not saying you be beheaded. I'm simply saying we take away your property. And then we put the mark of Cain upon your forehead. You never serve in any public office. If we do that, then the culture will begin to change. And when the culture begins to change, then we'll have men and women who, when they get into public office, they simply want to do good. Then people will begin to pay taxes because they know that the taxes will go to construction of roads. The taxes will go into agriculture. Taxes will go into the things that benefit them. I grew up in this country, and you did, Cyrus. When you would go into a clinic, you'd find a medical officer. They would diagnose the problem that you had. A prescription would be written. You would walk next door and you would get medicine. Today, you start by buying an exercise book in a supermarket. You go with it to the clinic. They write for you and they tell you to go to the next pharmacy, which is possibly owned by the pharmacist who is a pharmacist in the public hospital. All of us only go to private hospitals if we can afford it. The culture is bad. the culture is rotten in Kenya, and that is not very different from many African countries, save for very few. We must change it. And the law only is not going to change it. The law can only change it when the law applies to everybody, irrespective of who you are. I conclude by repeating what I said. Bad manners will not be solved by enacting more and more laws. We must begin to have a culture of respecting the law. And you are there. When you served in government, I would myself want to hear you as a legislator today, now that you have had some period of rethinking, not being in parliament, in active politics. What, in your view, for example, just to support what I'm saying, or to give it a little oomph, what would you do today if you were to go in parliament and serve as a cabinet minister differently from what you did then?
Today I wouldn't agree to serve as a cabinet minister. I would maybe have served as a cabinet minister in Kibaki's administration. First term, the first 5 years, because really that was a cabinet minister. Secondly, we didn't have the new constitution. But as you put it rightly, the fish starts rotting from the head. Kibaki was firm the first 5 years. And if you are involved in enemy mischief, you are asked to step aside. And there's an incident even where one of our friends was asked to step aside and he refused. It was Kiraitu. And Kibaki just announced, I've talked to Honorable Kiraitu Murungi and he has accepted to step aside. He hadn't agreed, but this is the president announcing.
Yes.
So the problem of Kenya, in my view, and I want really to agree with you, is the head. If you get the head correct, even in a home, if the head of the house gets it right, the product out of that home will get it right. The change in the culture that has really entrenched itself, in 5 years, it did not exist just because the head did what was right. There is this question, journalists always ask politicians who wanted to lead this country. And the question has always been, what different are you going to do if you are given an opportunity by Kenyans to lead their country? There are two critical issues, in my view, that have affected this country. You are a cabinet minister, but you are not a cabinet minister. You are a cabinet secretary, but you are not a cabinet secretary. You are literally a clerk. It is the boss dictating on what should be done. Sometimes a cabinet meeting is just to follow the issues, the way issues are supposed to be handled. Decisions are already pre-made. We can see, and you are a witness, that the rule of law sometimes is thrown through the window.
The culture
has not changed.
We have new wine in old wine skin.
Yes.
And I can't agree with you more that I think is the problem not only of Kenya but many African countries, that you have individuals in position of leadership whose vision is about the next elections, not the next generation.
No.
And one can begin to see it even here. Elections are 3 years away, and we're already talking about an election which is 3 years away. So that we are not talking about how to serve people in the intervening period. And I remember in a few minutes ago, you talked about our young population. And one wonders, how are you going to deal with this youth bulge? These young people who are coming out of the universities. We now have tens of public universities, tens of private universities, and they want employment opportunities that will tax them, that will be appropriate for the qualification they have. So I can't agree with you more that this is the time when one requires visionary and resolute leadership.
Just to add, I had a bit of very good experience with what top leadership in this country is all about. I worked very closely with the late President Moi. Many Kenyans wondered that Jirong has just been campaigning for Moi. How come elections were last year and 1993 I was in terrible trouble, fighting for my life. Governments are interesting in Africa. When you have a thief as the leader, and you innocently go to the thief and tell the thief, why is Lumumba stealing? And yet Lumumba is stealing on behalf of that leader.
Yes.
You land in a lot of trouble.
Yes.
There was an incident.
Yes.
I haven't talked about this openly before. I worked with Jim Choge. Jim Choge was a lawyer.
Yes.
But he was also a lawyer of the late Honorable Nicholas Biwott. Jim Choge came to my office and gave me documents. Those documents had the details of where toxic waste was being dumped in Kenya. In my stupidity, I took those documents and went and confronted President Moi. And I told him, Mzee, I have information. The people in the Ministry of Energy, they are cheating Kenyans that they are looking for oil, but this is toxic waste that is being dumped in Northeastern and around that area. I've never been in trouble like that. Because I was asked, where did you get these documents? And if you don't say where you got these documents, it's the end of you. Where did you get these documents? So I said, Mzee, you said, we must always keep secret the source of our information.
Yes.
I have given you these documents, you're the head of state. You have the machinery to find out whether it is true or not. So for me, I'm relying on you to verify and validate these documents. Because the person with the power to do it is yourself, not myself. And he made noise, ranted for almost 30 minutes. And the noise was loud enough until his security thought we are quarreling and that I'm not respecting the president. They were opening the door to check, is this young man fighting the head of state?
Yeah.
But then, all through, I just thought he's being unreasonable. Giving him documents, he needs to find out. But then when I was leaving, is when my head opened up, because I was told, whatever we have discussed here, if I hear it out there, utajua. So I left. Then I said, what was I doing? Did I go to talk to whoever was dumping the toxic waste, that you are dumping toxic waste here? Because that appeared to be the reason. Because the way the whole information was received was so violent. As I crossed the gates of State House, it was 4 p.m. Gaylord Davedi, who was the permanent secretary, had just been posted into the Ministry of Energy. He was quickly reshuffled. I heard it on radio. We had just been discussing. He left the office for a few minutes and came back to continue the forum. That little 2, 3, 4 minutes, he moved out. A reshuffle was done. Because it was believed Gaylord must have given me these documents. Yet I was given by Jim Choge. Then I woke up, Jim Choge having been the lawyer of the late Biwott. Biwott had given them those documents to bring to me, and then go back and tell Moi we are naked. This boy knows too much about us. We must destroy him. So there is a lot of, I don't know how to call it.
But that, to me, the experience you have talks about the significance of leadership and patriotism.
Yes.
And you know, the one...
And the quality
yes.
of the people we put in office.
Absolutely.
The intent. Look at the cancer rate in the Republic of Kenya.
Yes.
And if you do that survey, it is heaviest from Meru side coming. When you go towards coast, towards Western and Nyanza, the cases are not as many because the dumping was taking place in that direction. Now, you have leadership that has the capacity to convince Kenyans that I'm looking for an office to serve you. that so-and-so or the other leadership you had looks at me because of ABCD. But that is not the topic. The topic is, I'm looking for an office to eat your taxes.
Yes.
We need, as Kenyans, to start understanding that sometimes I've seen a serious war between Natembea and Wetangula. Oh, you're not doing this for us, you're not doing this for us. Sometimes these people have just to be there to survive. They don't have the power to do anything. And therefore, to me, the key is to get a right president. Somebody who understands inclusivity. There is a dangerous topic which I want you to comment on, which is emerging now. When you have a head of civil service saying, I came to this function because I'm an idiot, that you are grouping Kenyans today as nilots in power, the reason that is being given on why Raila had to be reached. And you are saying, what message are you sending?
But I think I'm very clear. And one of the things that we must, as a country, fight against and fight vigorously is the grouping of people into ethnic cocoons.
Thank you.
This country can ill afford the misfortune of labeling people that one is in this or that office because of their ethnic background. Our ethnicity, our diversity is a resource which can be harnessed and harnessed in a powerful way. And I do not want somebody to point out that I am in this arrangement or that we are forming this political formulation because we belong to this ethnic grouping. That is the most dangerous avenue to take. That is the shortest avenue to chaos in any country, and it must be condemned and must be fought vigorously, and the tone must be consistent and unequivocal from the top. And if it is not, the top must be told in no uncertain terms that this country can ill afford. We have seen many countries right now. We see the conflict that is going on in Sudan is beginning to take those dimensions where people are being grouped into Dinka, into Darfurians, into Arabs, into Africans. That, as Nyerere used to say, katika karne ya 21, we cannot use ethnicity. He says is those who are politically bankrupt, who take refuge in identifying things from an ethnic standpoint. And such bankrupt politicians must be isolated, identified, and condemned.
Professor, it hurts. The people doing this are people who have gone to school.
It means the school did not go into them. Because you can go into school, but nothing happened. It's just like throwing stone into a bucket of water. After a short while, it dries out, but it doesn't change. But if school has gone through you, it's like a foam, and you put it there, and you can see that this individual has had the kind of education that enables to say, Cyrus Jirongo is going to be in this position because I am convinced that he is the best person to do it, not because he comes from my village. That village mentality,
and not that he's a Bantu or he's a Nilot.
How does that?
It's so ridiculous that
you know, Cyrus,
it doesn't make sense at all.
When you are flying in Kenya Airways, do you ever ask the tribe of the pilot? You want a competent pilot. And that the nation, the Kenyan state, and indeed any African nation is like an aeroplane. The people who are the passengers want a pilot who is going to ensure that that plane takes off, that plane lands safely, and everybody is at home. It doesn't matter, and I think, who is it who said it at one time? I think it is Deng Xiaoping in China, when they were moving into what has now made China the great economic power that it is, that we know that we have rats which we want to catch. To us, it does not matter whether the cat is white or black. What we want is a cat that catches rats. And that is what we want in this country.
And the most ridiculous thing is that this is something that has been there before, when we had these stories of Kamatusa.
Yes.
When we had Biwot telling Mzee Odinga that we are two rivers.
Yes.
As my lord, we have to meet somewhere. That game failed. And you remember, that is one of my troubles, because when they talked about Nilotic alliance, I came up and said, no, and then we form a Bantu alliance. Yes. Just look as stupid as they were.
And then where do you get?
Where do you get?
When you begin to form alliances of this kind, which are not based on ideas, because I want to form an alliance with you because we have ideas on how to run the economy.
Yes.
We have ideas on how to run our education system. We have an idea of how to deal with health system. We have an idea of how to have a taxation regime. Those are...
And that we are clear about that every Kenyan must inclusively participate in the development of his country.
Without doubt. Any other alliance...
Not that I get into position so that I feel it with the Luyas. Or you get into a position, you feel it with the Luos from your village.
Yeah.
What kind of stupidity is that?
And that is the kind of stupidity, if there is a ghost which possesses us, which is of that kind, that is the ghost that requires to be exorcised, because it is a dangerous ghost. And we say this seriously, Cyrus. We have seen countries, when I look at Kenyans and a few countries which by grace have not degenerated into civil war or civil unrest, let us not for one moment imagine that we are immune.
We are not.
We are not immune. And I mean,
saw it in 2007.
2007, 2008.
Yes.
And look at Sudan. Sudan regained their independence in 1956. And the Sudanese who are now in Khartoum you said when the war started about a year ago, that no battle has ever come to Khartoum. Today, for the last 1 year, no education, no economic activity in Sudan. And we must warn ourselves. We say in Kiswahili, when ukiona mwenzako akinyolewa, kichwa chako kitie maji. And how do we do it? We come together because ideas unite us and culture creates a diversity which we can celebrate. That is what will make Kenya a going concern for this generation and generations yet to be born. And anything else, we must fight and condemn.
It has to be a clear decision, clear attitude by those that want to participate in leadership, that we are stronger as all communities in this country, every one of us contributing, every one of us playing their rightful role, and not that the only competent people come from the tribe of the president. It's impossible. Every Kenyan has gone to school.
Absolutely.
And that decision has to be made.
And inclusivity, I've just seen some of the surveys, which I think are useful. People think that inclusivity and merit are mutually exclusive. It is not true.
It's not true.
What one must do deliberately is to make everybody feel that they are part of the party. So that in one of the things that we must do in high-level public offices, you must have people to say that they are people who are drawn from their own background and their own backyard, and there is no shortage of qualified people. The Nigerians call it the federal character. We call it here the national character. And it is called, if you go to countries in the Nordic countries, even in Sweden, where you have a Swedish population and a Finnish population, or you have the Laps, the Samis, you want to ensure that everybody feels that they are part of the decision-making process. And these things are very critical to the cohesion of the nation, to the understanding of the nation, to people beginning to feel they are part of the decision-making process and deliberate processes that must be made. If you are only comfortable with people who come from your village, then you had better go back to the village and
be the village leader.
And be the village headman. In that space, we can allow you to do your village thing.
Yes.
But when you come to the center, you must now know that the center brings together a diversity of ideas which must be harnessed for the national good. And that is true for Kenya and true for the continent of Africa. Otherwise, you are creating a recipe for disaster.
We have dealt with the poor leadership and the choices we make as voters. There is a problem that has also dogged Africa for a long time. We had great leaders with great visions. The person you are named after, Patrice Lumumba, DRC, or Democratic Republic of Congo, will not be the same if the foundation was laid up by the ideas and the vision Patrick Lumumba had. We said Nyerere had failed economically, but Nyerere succeeded in leaving a united country. And Nyerere gave Tanzanians an identity. Kenya, we started off also very well. You remember Tom Mboya talking about African socialism. You remember Mzee Kenyatta talking about mimi ni Mkenya. Tuwe wa Kenya. Although later in life he lapsed into a Kiambu leader. What is eating the leadership in Africa? That we cannot develop our own identity, which we have. We don't need to develop it. We cannot retain our own identity.
It's not a curse. There is a beautiful Kiswahili saying, jishinde ushinde. Mwachamila ni mtumwa is yet another Kiswahili saying. My own view is that we must be comfortable in our skin and comfortable in the way we do things and identify our interests. If you look at the leaders that you've mentioned, if it was Julius Kambarage Nyerere, he said socialism and self-reliance. In other words, he was saying, I'm doing the thing that I'm doing because it is in harmony with our African traditional way of doing things, and we can refine it in a manner that sits well with contemporary economic agenda. When in Kenya we said in sessional paper number 10 of 1965, African Socialism, we said we think this sits well with the way we want to do things. When in the Democratic Republic of Congo, then Patrice Emery Lumumba disagreed with Kasavubu, with the Shombe, with Kalonji and everybody else and said, we are going to define what the Congolese want. When Seretse Khama said we want to use our resources for the people of Botswana, Nkrumah said we want to use our things for the benefit of the people of Ghana, and Nnamdi Azikiwe, the idea is you must know what you want. Once you know what you want, it helps you to choose the friends and the partners that you need to make you achieve what you want. Because the relationship between you and those friends is then of mutual benefit. And that is why in the non-aligned movement they say, we'll neither look east nor west, we'll look forward.
Yes.
And they said we are non-aligned but positively neutral. If we can get something which the Americans have, which is beneficial to it, we'll work with the Americans. If it is from the Russians, we'll work with the Russians. If it is the Chinese, we'll want to work with the Chinese. And to me, this is what successive generation of African leaders have failed to identify. What do we want? Because America, before they come to work with us, they know what they want. The British know what they want. The French know what they want. The Chinese know what they want. And they can explain it in a single sentence.
Yes.
Can we in Kenya say what we want? The Arabs in the recent past know what they want. Look at Qatar. Qatar has a population of no more than 500,000 Qataris, live around the 1.5 million who are from different worlds, and see their power in the world. What do they have that Nigeria does not have? They have the same oil. And look at the media house that they have in Al Jazeera. Look at their airline, which is now beginning to participate in the aviation industry in a very strong way. Look at Dubai, which was
There were fishermen the other day.
Fishermen just 30 years ago. Look at Kuwait. In other words, to answer the question that you pose, Africans must have self-esteem. We must define what we want. And once we have defined what we want, we must pursue it unapologetically, and we must also work together as a continent of Africa in order to strengthen ourselves. We must trade. Look at the East African region and look at the relationship between Uganda and Kenya in terms of trade, or Kenya and Tanzania, or Tanzania and Burundi and Rwanda. That is a market of 300 million people. So that if we were to make, for example, the economy to be the defining factor for our diplomacy, perhaps the most important diplomatic post economically would be Uganda or Tanzania, not the United Kingdom,
for sure.
Not France.
No.
And to me, that is what we must do. And that is why one of the things that I support and support very passionately is, number one, East African community. We start as East African community, West African community, SADC, Central African community, Maghreb, then we come to the African Union, then we begin to talk about a single currency.
Perfect.
Today, I'm in Kenya today, shilling, Ugandan shilling, Kenya shilling, Tanzania shilling, Amafaranga in Rwanda, you go to the Burundi, Amafaranga, and yet what we want, even with our own currencies, we are looking for the dollar more than anything else. And if we do that, the United States of America will begin to respect us. The way they respect the Qataris, the way they respect the Bahrainis. Right now, Mauritius is earning more respect in Africa than South Africa does. And Mauritius is a small island. And if you don't, and respect must be earned by what you do. So nobody cast us. We are just not doing the right things. Nobody cast us. It is we who are behaving improperly, and sometimes we even believe the things that we can do with our own hands. We think we must pray and fast. God gave us the divine instruction, go and subdue the world. He did not tell us to go fast and manna shall fall from heaven. He did not say that.
Tell me. What do we want as Kenyans?
An average Kenyan or many average Africans will tell you, I want good life. Then we must define good life. What is good life? Number one, you want shelter, decent shelter. You want good education opportunities for our young men and women. And once we have educated them, we want them to be in a position where they can innovate and invent. They want to eat good food, so they need agriculture. They also want the opportunity, when they are sick, they also want to have good medical services. And they want peace and security. This is what good life. Last week I was at a function where I was launching a club for happiness. And what is happiness? Happiness is the totality of physical and emotional and spiritual well-being in an environment that judges you by the content of your character, not by the color of your skin or your ethnic extraction. That is what Kenyans want, and that is what they want their government to do. They want a government that respects them and enables them to thrive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I couldn't do it any better.
Thank you very much.
I hope Kenyans, those who will have an opportunity to watch what we are discussing, they must understand that all of us are in pursuit of happiness and good life.
Good life.
Yeah, you cannot have happiness when you don't have good life.
Yes, indeed.
You can't have good life if you are segregated upon because you are a certain tribe. You can't have a good life when your salary can hardly last you for a week. Yet abundance surrounds you, that you have all that you can turn into good living, and that we cannot continue to blame the foreign nations that colonized us, that influence our leaders, that we must take a stand and understand for us to have that good life, we must do it ourselves.
Absolutely.
What is happening in the Sahel with Burkina, with Niger, with Mali is unprecedented. We have young people who have gotten into power through extraordinary means, which are understandable, and they are saying that our resources must now be used for the benefit of our people, and that is the way to go.
Hey there, and welcome to Fanya Mambo Africa. It's always an exciting time, and today it's more exciting because we have one of the most vocal Pan-Africanist voices in the continent. And of course, when you see PLO in the building, you know we have a lot to talk about, from Kenya to Africa and to the geopolitical space. Karibu sana, Professor.
Asante sana kwa kunialika.
Ukianza Kiswahili kidogo utanipoteza. Good to see you.
Thank you.
On this National Prayer Breakfast Day for Kenya. And the highlight for me for that national breakfast was that our president apologized to our neighbors Uganda and Tanzania for anything that we might have wronged them with. What is your feeling of his speech?
Diplomatically, I think President Ruto has done the right thing. We must remember, one, that President Ruto is the current chair of the East African Community. We must also remember that the current Secretary General of the East African Community is Kenyan. And for that reason, if Kenyans have conducted themselves in a manner that has been interpreted by Uganda and Tanzania as constituting disrespect, it is incumbent upon the President of the Republic of Kenya to offer apologies. Of course, there are those who will say that the apologies are not heartfelt, that the apologies are merely diplomatic niceties. But that is how it begins, so that we begin to create an environment where we can engage as we should, like sisterly nations. We are talking about the integration of East African community, and we cannot integrate when there is mutual suspicion. And we must also remember that East Africa has found itself in this situation before. In 1977, when East African Community One was collapsing, one of the reasons was what was described at that time as the Nairobi mentality, to mean that Kenyans look down upon other members of the East African community. And I believe that the president is informed by those historical realities, and he has seen it fit on the occasion of the prayer breakfast to offer apology.
All right, that's great to hear and understand the basis. When you look at the beginning of all this tiff that has been going on between Tanzania and Kenya in the last 1 week, came after we had our citizens, senior citizens and respectable citizens of Kenya, Mother Karua, Dr. William Mutunga, among others, deported, and of course Boniface Mwangi, who was tortured and dropped somewhere at the border. When you see such things happening from our neighbor state, what is your take on that, and why would that have happened actually?
First of all, let us use terminology correctly. In my understanding, Martha Karua and Dr. William Mutunga were denied entry into Tanzania. They did not actually get into Tanzanian soil. That is denial of entry. And I speak as one who has been denied entry. In 2018, I was denied entry into Zambia during the administration of President Lungu. And if you look at the news, the then Vice President Winner did actually issue a statement saying that I was denied entry for security reasons. I was not deported. I was then interviewed myself, and this is the position that I took, that if in the interpretation of the administration of President Lungu I am a threat to security, then they must do what they must, and I must accept it whether I like it or not. And that, I think, is how we should behave. Why? Because every country has its own laws and how they interpret threats to security. Those interpretations may be unreasonable, We may not like them. They may harm our ego, but that is their interpretation. In the case of the two individuals who are admitted into Tanzania, that is Boniface Mwangi and the lady from Uganda, allegations have been made about torture. And I speak as a lawyer would. Allegations have been made. And we have seen them coming into the country in ways that are not normal. It is incumbent upon the government of the United Republic of Tanzania to institute investigations to ensure that those who may have perpetrated such acts are dealt with in accordance with the law. And it is not lost on me that, in fact, the government of the Republic of Kenya did, in fact, write to the government of the United Republic of Tanzania to give access to Boniface Mwangi. And it is the day after that was done that he was actually released and dropped on the border between Kenya and Tanzania. But when one is dealing with matters of sovereignty and one is dealing with sensitive matters such as these, I think it is important that one is not quick to jump to conclusions. I am aware and I have participated in cases where individuals from other countries are allowed to observe trials, particularly when those trials have political connotations, as in the case between the Republic of Tanzania and Tundu Lissu. But the question is, how do you do it? Does the government of the Republic of Tanzania, or did the government of the Republic of Tanzania expect the individuals to make an application through the right channels, whether those channels are through the Chief Justice of the Republic of Tanzania, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or the Office of the Attorney General, before they traveled? Remember, there is another Kenyan who was allowed to attend court, the former Chief Justice Maraga. What avenue did he follow that allowed him to get into the courtroom, which may not have been followed by the others? All these questions must be brought into play before we are quick to condemn. And I am one who takes the view that the vitriol that we have then seen after their denial of entry and what one may call the brouhaha that has come about must be dealt with diplomatically. Because ultimately, as the President of the United Republic of Tanzania came out very vehemently and said, we do not want Kenyans to interfere with our affairs. The Parliament of the United Republic of Tanzania also debated the issue quite vehemently, using very strong language, which in my view is not in the best interest of all the nations in the East African community.
When you see how this, especially the Tanzanian MPs debated this whole affair and looking at it from our goal to work as East Africa community, do you think not just in Tanzania, even when you look at some of the leaders, political leaders in Kenya and the talk that there is there goodwill to have a functional EAC, fully functional?
You know, my own view is that even within a family, there are occasional quarrels. It is how you handle the quarrels that determines how mature you are. If you permit me this famous statement by Maya Angelou, we will be defeated many times, but we must never be defeated ultimately. And I am of the view that we have the duty to remember that historically we had an East African community that collapsed. It collapsed for a number of reasons, including, as I said earlier, what was described as the Nairobi mentality, which brought about suspicion. It collapsed because we did not allow it to be a people-to-people kind of collaboration and integration. And if indeed in 1999 we realized that we were better integrated, leading to East African community number 2, we must remind ourselves that the path of vitriol, the path of insults, the path of condescending behavior towards one another, the path of abuse and insults is not the path to take. The path to take is the path of reconciliation, the path of accommodation, the path of recognizing that the unity that we seek is in diversity, and Kenyans have a specific and particular responsibility now. Because the President of the Republic of Kenya is the current chair of the East African Community, and the Secretary General is also from Kenya, it would be sad if East African Community were to die, if the child were to die, so to speak, in our hands. We cannot do that. I would have expected by now that President Ruto would have summoned an extraordinary meeting of the East African heads of states to discuss the dangers that are posed to the situation in East Africa. Remember that even the Democratic Republic of Congo only last week did not send any representative to a meeting of speakers. So there is tension within the community, and the duty of the current chair is to ensure that that is arrested. Remember also that the Secretariat of the East African Community is laboring under the weight of shortage of funds, so that workers have not been paid or are not being paid. All these factors conjoined do not speak a very good language, and the time is now to lower the din so that the rhetoric is the kind of rhetoric that is in the best interest of East Africa, and we move in the right direction.
Well, that's wise words, and I hope they will pick. From the human rights activists space, there's talk that the three presidents of Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania are actually against human rights and activism, and that's why there seems to have been a collusion to have Kenyans and Ugandans arrested in Tanzania. Would that be something that makes sense? Is it a genuine concern for activists? And also, is activism across East Africa a crime, actually?
Let me first of all say that your question is leading me into the sea of speculation. It's a very deep sea, and I refuse to swim in it. I prefer to ground myself on things that I can touch. One, East Africa, like the rest of the world, is having to grapple with social media. And this is a very agile medium which you cannot deal with. President Museveni became president in the 1980s when social media did not exist in the manner that it did. President Samia Suluhu Hassan runs a country that, whether you like it or not, is politically there is some kind of discipline, and CCM Chama Cha Mapinduzi, which came after TANU and Afro-Shirazi, has been in power since they regained independence. And in Kenya, of course, we have had a totally different trajectory with the multiplicity of political alliances. And of course, South Sudan has its own problems. Rwanda and Burundi have their own way of doing things. Somalia, which is also a part of the East African community. And of course, the Democratic Republic of Congo. What is my take? I believe that those who are warriors for human rights must be given space. History has been consistent in telling us that rights must be fought for. And some of the individuals that are involved in this kind of situation are people that I know reasonably well. They have been in these spaces and they have made their contribution. But it's also important to say that we are not integrated, so that there are certain things that one may very comfortably do in the Republic of Kenya. Remember that in the Republic of Kenya, we had a movement that led to the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And if you look at the Constitution of Kenya 2010, it allows for many things which may not legitimately be accommodated in the United Republic of Tanzania or accommodated in Uganda. And it is wise for those who are coming from Kenya to remember that the Tanzanian reality and the Ugandan reality is not necessarily the Kenyan reality. And when you do that, then you will recognize that your engagement in those countries must be informed by the realities of those countries. And this is not unique to Kenya. It's not unique to this region. We are seeing that even as we speak now with a new administration in the United States of America. We see it in the United Kingdom. We see it in Europe. We see it in China. These are the realities. So in a nutshell, I'm saying that one of the things that we must do as East Africans is to move towards integration. If you look at the constitutive document, the Treaty of the East African Community said that we will start with a common customs union, a common market, and ultimately political federation. In the year 2004, the then heads of states and government did say that we fast-track political federation. But nothing happened. All the deadlines given in that prescription have not been met. In fact, under the fast tracking, the president of the East African Community ought to have been sworn in the year 2010. That tells you that not all the countries are comfortable with surrendering aspects of their sovereignty to what would be an Arusha administration, Arusha being the current headquarters of the East African Community. And that tells you that people still want to ring fence, or politicians in respective countries want to ring fence certain things. And you see it even as regards bodies such as the East African Court of Justice. There are certain things which they are not allowed to deal with because they are restricted to the domestic jurisdictions. So sensitivity to those realities is what wisdom is all about. If one is going to be gung-ho about those things and to say that what happens in Nairobi must happen in Dar es Salaam or in Kampala or Kigali or Bujumbura or Kinshasa or Mogadishu or in Juba, then one will find that there will be pushback.
That's very true. Some of the contributors that have been on this debate have been also the fact that Tanzania is both a member of EAC and SADC has also given them an upper hand of wanting to sort of, like we have Nairobi mentality, also Tanzania wanting to have its own maybe Dar mentality.
You know, there is a sense in which I've always been one who is an opponent of fidelity to RECs, or regional economic communities. For historical reasons, Tanzania is a very strong member of SADC. And Tanzania is also a very strong member of the East African Community. And in fact, the headquarters of East African Community. The only other country that finds ourselves in such a situation is the Democratic Republic of Congo within the community. But it is also true that Kenya is a member of IGAD. And these regional economic communities, therefore, have problems because of multiple memberships. And that is why some of us, and quite a number of people, hold the view that ultimately these regional communities must be seen as building blocks for the African Union. Because once we treat them as such, we'll be, in a manner of speaking, governed at the continental level, with the administration in Addis Ababa be the one that is making these prescriptions on critical issues. As we, if one must compare, we see in Europe with the European Union, with the European directives covering critical issues, whether it's on economic issues, whether it's on human rights issues, on matters as mundane as the quality of water. So it is true that when you belong to two RECs, there are situations where you find yourself conflicted. Conflicted because you may discover that there are certain things that SADC wants to be done in a particular way, and the EAC does not want them to be done. And this itself does create problems. And I think the quicker we harmonize these RECs and harmonize the constitutive statements and move towards a more integrated Africa in the manner that was contemplated in 1963, the safer we will be.
Very, very interesting. What would be the solution then for, of course, the bigger dream is to have a united Africa. But before we get there, what's the first steps that will actually functional steps for East Africa, for that matter?
I hold the view that East Africa should very quickly move towards integration. And I now hold the view that although we have a number of newly admitted countries such as DRC and Somalia and Sudan, if you may, in terms of integration, we should have what I call coalition of the willing. If Tanzania and Kenya and Uganda and Rwanda think they are ready, then we can start and the others will join. And what do I mean when I talk about integration? I know that we are already dealing with a common market not as well as we should. I know that we are already dealing with customs union as well as we should. I think that we should be moving towards political integration. And political integration will mean that we begin to have somebody who can be designated as the head of East African community politically. Even if it is rotational in the early days, it will be a good thing. It will mean that our judicial system will be a lot more integrated, so that instead of having a Supreme Court of Kenya, Supreme Court of Uganda, or the High Court of the Court of Appeal of Tanzania, all those courts will be merged, and what will then be the ultimate court in the region will be the East African Supreme Court. If we did that, and we have a parliament that is functional, not an East African parliament which does nothing, whose laws do not affect us, we have a proper parliament, we ensure that we function as would a country. It will take time. One does not believe, at least I do not believe, that it's going to be a big bang kind of thing. But we should be making steps, even if they are baby steps, so that we eliminate even free movement of peoples. We now have an East African passport, and we can move within some of the East African countries by way of an identity card. That is good. What we should do, as a good friend of mine is a member of the East African community called David Sankok. He normally says that we should widen, deepen, and strengthen. Widen, deepen, and strengthen the East African community. And if we do that, and do it in sincerity, I think in matters of integration, the peoples of East Africa are ahead of the political leaders.
That's very interesting, and I can't wait to see if we achieve that, having one court. Having seen what the Supreme Court of Kenya handles, yes, it would be very interesting to see when it's a whole East African region with one space, for that matter. Wow, no, I think we've had too much of Tanzania. Now let's just move a bit. Yes. The General Langley is in Kenya. The U.S. Africom is in Kenya for some security meeting, and he's given, not a directive, but he's been proposing that they need to get away, like Kenya should focus on its own security, that America should not be bothered so much on putting in so much about security in Kenya. How is that moving forward, and how does that affect our Somali relationship with Kenya and the integration that goes into that?
First, let me say that every country that is sovereign has the primary duty of taking care of its security, both internally and externally. Kenya has that obligation, which means that it is anomalous to have military bases of a foreign country in your country, unless it is for purposes of collaboration or cooperation, which should have a term limit. I can't agree, therefore, with the American general that we must pay our bills in order to defend our country. And if we do that, then we will use our resources properly and use them for the benefit of our people. Because what has happened over the years, and this is not only true of Kenya, but true of a number of African countries, because we have relied so much on being supported by the people at one time, we called them donors, sometimes we called them development partners, but what is the reality is that they support things that we should be doing. So that if we have a problem with Somalia, for example, this is a sister nation. This is a sister nation which is also a member of the East African community. This is a nation whose indigents and nationals are also to be found in Kenya. You know, Somali is a unique nation. There are Somalis who are Kenyans. There are Somalis who are Ethiopians. There are Somalis who are from Djibouti. And this is by dint of a colonial legacy which we chose to live with, the Berlin Conference of 1884. In 1963, there was an attempt, an argument that boundaries should be redrawn. And it was in Cairo in 1964 that the leaders said that there would be so much trouble and disturbance if we tried to interfere with these boundaries. That is how the doctrine of inviolability of inherited boundaries came about. And it was very well articulated by the leaders of the day, including greats such as Kwame Nkrumah, Gamal Abdel Nasser, and Julius Kambarage Nyerere. The understanding, of course, was that we would be moving towards integration, and that those boundaries would only be useful for purposes of administration, not as places where we would station our armed young men and women to kill each other. So going forward, I think that matters of security in East Africa should be the domain of the East African countries. And if there is any dispute, they should be addressed as such. And you will remember that even in Somalia, we have had Kenyan forces doing a reasonably good job. We have had Burundians. We have had Ugandans, which sends the message that we are capable of putting boots on the ground for the sake of our brothers and sisters. And the sooner we do that effectively, the more we will be respected. It should not take the United States of America and their taxpayers' money to create security in this region.
You know, what's interesting is that the same general was against Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traore, and saying that he's actually using gold money for his personal interests rather than the nation. While essentially what Traore has done is to make his nation sovereign and let it work for its own. So when he speaks that about Burkina Faso, but then for East Africa, the talk is different.
No,
what's the message?
They speak with both sides of the mouth. and that is what I call diplomatic schizophrenia, because they are split personalities. What is happening in the Sahel with Burkina, with Niger, with Mali is unprecedented. We have young people who have gotten into power through extraordinary means, which are understandable. And they are saying that our resources must now be used for the benefit of our people. And that is the way to go. This is the kind of thing that we want to see done. Of course, when you are doing the right thing, which is not in the best interest of the conceptual West, you'll be called many names. You'll be called a dictator. You'll be called many names. So let us brace for that. And let's wear our seatbelts, that anybody who tries to do the right thing, and Samora Moises Machel said it very well, that when you see any European power singing the praises of an African leader, you must ask yourself what that leader is doing against his or her people.
Something else we have seen that, this week has had a lot of interesting diplomatic affairs. The IMF is now calling President Ruto to stop charging the lower cadre of citizens this SHA amounts and just resort to, let them, because they can't fund that. The amount of money they make is too low. So now when we have this general saying this, then we have IMF saying this. What does that mean about Kenya, and why is then Kenya so important for them?
Whenever I listen to the rhetoric from the Bretton Woods institutions as presently constituted IMF, World Bank, I laugh, because they are not interested in the best interest of African countries. It is these same institutions who in the 1980s came up with one-size-fits-all prescriptions, structural adjustment. We have never recovered from structural adjustment. Of course, occasionally they say the right things. If I would agree with them. We have a saying in Kiswahili, mgala muue lakini haki yake mpe, obaniani mbaya kiatu chake dawa. It means that those who are in the business of doing bad things, occasionally they may even produce good results, to transliterate it loosely for ease of understanding. So they are right. My own view is that if this administration were to use our funds properly, if, for example, we were to reduce wastage, reduce allowances, reduce these unnecessary foreign travel, reduce these things where people spend $500,000 to go and distribute bursary checks of 300 million, reduce these counties and have fewer governors and fewer ministers and MCA, we would have enough money to have a proper medical scheme where people below a certain level of income would walk into us. And I lived in this Nairobi. I lived in this country where in my rural home, and here where I lived in Nairobi, in Jericho and Maringo, I would walk into a dispensary, I would be treated, and I would receive medicine without paying a damn, because my taxes, or the taxes of my parents at that time, were being properly utilized. It can be done. And it should be done. I went to the University of Nairobi like many other people. I did not pay a single cent, except in the third year, when we now had loans only of 34,000 Kenya shillings. And I repaid it all like all others. It can be done. It can be done. But I want us Kenyans to stop using the word free. It is not free. It simply means that our taxes are being used to pay for them. They are not free. Somebody must pay for it, and it is us. So that the politician must not think that they are paying it for us. Like Robert Gabriel Mugabe of Zimbabwe once said, that thanking your politician for presiding over the building of a road is like thanking the ATM machine for giving you the money that you banked in the first place.
Very interesting. Somaliland was to open a liaison office, but it was cancelled this week, actually. What does that now mean about our relationship with this country diplomatically as a country?
There are many very complex issues in the lives of nations. Remember that at independence, there were two Somalis, so to speak. Somaliland, which was under the colonial tutelage of the British, and Somalia, which was under the tutelage of the Italians. They federated. It would appear that the wedding did not go very well, and in the 1900s and 1990s there was a war, and the reality on the ground as we speak is that there is a government in Hargeisa, which is Somaliland, which is not recognized by the United Nations and by the African Union as a separate country from Somalia. So there is, the Mogadishu government says there is only one Somalia, and it is only that one Somalia that can have diplomatic presence in Kenya or anywhere. It can be compared to the one China policy, where it is the Beijing government, not the Taipei government. But the reality is that there is an administration in Taiwan, in Taipei. So the question is, can Kenya offer diplomatic succor to Somaliland? My understanding is that the liaison office is not at the level of an embassy, but it is a recognition of a practical reality that there is a functioning entity called Somaliland. In terms of international relations, it raises very many questions, and Kenya will have to make a decision. One of the things that I talk about is not unique to that part of the world. I think that when we talk about African unity, these are some of the things that we'll have to grapple with. It is not going to be easy. It is going to be uncomfortable. Sometimes it is going to be heated, but we must deal with them in the same manner that we dealt with the question of South Sudan. The same issue is being raised in southern Cameroons. You remember in the case of Nigeria in 1967, it even led to a civil war when Chukwuemeka Odumegu Ojukwu at that time declared that Biafra was a separate entity. So all these are very complex issues, and it would be careless on my part, and indeed on anybody's part, to be prescriptive about what should be done. But my view is that this is the opportunity for the East African community or the African Union to call extraordinary meetings to deal with these issues, because these kinds of tensions are not to be allowed to fester. We also know the situation as it is with Morocco and Sahrawi.
But it seems we've taken a side already with Mudavadi's visit to Morocco the other day.
You know, one of the things that Kenya is doing very consistently is to consistently make mistakes at the diplomatic front.
So that was a mistake?
We speak with both sides of the mouth, and therefore you do not know what we are saying. So my own view is that we should be very slow. We should understand what we are doing. This is not the first time that we are doing what we are doing. I remember at one time there was a representative of Sahrawi here and that of Morocco, and we were unclear of what to do, and of course we apologized. So once again we are in Rabat. I don't know whether in 2 weeks' time we'll be apologizing again. My own view is that on matters such as this, there should be a meeting of the African Union, and the African Union takes a position, and that position then binds all African countries, and those who do not want to be bound by it will have reservations. If you do that, then you'll be doing the right thing and making the right diplomatic decisions.
And that's on the African level.
On the African level, but at bilateral level, I think we are making too many mistakes. And this is not the first mistake that we are making. I'm making mistakes. I'm not saying. I am of the view that Sahrawi, the people of Sahrawi, should be allowed. This is my personal view, that the people of Sahrawi should be allowed to determine whether they want to be an autonomous state. It is a decision that they should make. And they should be allowed by way of a referendum, which is supervised by the United Nations and the African Union.
When you're speaking of making many mistakes, and that has been a feeling with, I think, a lot of other critics, what then guides our foreign policy so that we are not finding ourselves in such blunders oftentimes?
I think there has been published in the Kenya Gazette, I think I may be wrong, but it's session of paper number 1 of 2025, a 135-page document on Kenya's foreign policy, which I think is now available at the government printer. And I've read the document. It says many things. It's good on paper. It says what is going to drive us, how we are going to focus on the economy, among other things, how we are going to have brotherly relations, and how we are essentially going to be a country. It speaks once again to the position that we took in the 1960s, that Kenya is going to be non-aligned and positively neutral. As a student of history, I remember when the non-aligned movement came, and it was at the behest of Jawaharlal Nehru of India, President Sukarno of Indonesia, Joseph Broz Tito of Yugoslavia, Gamal Abdel Nasser, and of course Kwame Nkrumah. They were saying that the world is divided at that time between the West and the East, to mean the Soviet Union at that time. We in Asia, we in Africa are not going to align with any, but we are going to be positively neutral, to mean that if any one side is right in a particular thing, we'll support the right thing. That is why Nkrumah said we neither look east nor west, we look forward. Kenya, I hear us to be saying so, that we are going to work with the Russians, with the Chinese, with the Indians, if it is necessary to do so in our sovereign interest. We are also going to work with the Europeans and with the Americans and Australians and Canadians, if it is necessary to do so. And you Russians, you Chinese, you Americans, you British, you European Union, don't tell us what to do. This is our funeral. We organize it in our own way. You may sympathize with us, but let us fry in our own oil.
And this funeral is very interesting because just the other day, a few weeks ago, the president was in China, and we sort of looked like we are looking east in the way he gave the speech. And after that, then Kenya was being discussed at the Senate in the US, and they were saying now we are going to rethink of how we relate with Kenya. So what does that mean then? Because we have the session paper is out, but the president goes, gives a speech. The US feels, no, this is not what is supposed to be discussed.
You know, you must always remember that in international relations, the conceptual West and dominant countries, hegemons such as the United States of America, when they look at little economies such as Kenya, they think we should do their bidding. So when they discuss it, they say this little country with a GDP of 120 billion United States dollars, which is not even the size of Washington, D.C., they should wait for us to direct them. They should not be going and making decisions on their behalf. Yet in international relations, once you are sovereign country, size of economy does not matter. But that is the theory of it. The reality of it is that they are hegemons in the world. And African countries will continue to be discussed, whatever you do, as long as it's interpreted by these countries which are hegemons. Sometimes, not only the United States, sometimes if you listen to French leaders and even British, they still think we are their colonies. They still think so. They must be reminded we are not. And that is why I think the great American civil rights, John Henry Clark, said, black beauty without black power means nothing. We must be beautiful and powerful. And that power can only come about through integration. And that is why I'm one of the greatest proponents of integration. If we cannot do it initially with the Big Bang African Union, let's do it with East Africa. Because when you are dealing East Africa, immediately your population is approaching 300 million people. You have a big market. The internal market then becomes almost as big as that of the United States of America. The monies that we are spending in defense in each of these 8 countries can then be collapsed into one. Then you will be heard. And I want to conclude my answer by saying this. At one time, the same thing was told of South Africa when the president was Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. And he told the Americans, where were you when you are now telling me I should not tango with Libyans? You are telling me I should not tango with the Cubans. You are telling me I should not have any relationship with the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Where were you when we were fighting apartheid? Please, you are our friends, but don't choose my other friends for me. At least allow me the dignity of determining who my friends are.
Do you think the issue of AGOA may be a key factor as to why the US feels like they can also control?
You know, Africa Growth Opportunity, if you look at the actual impact of AGOA in African countries, you know, we can live without AGOA. African countries can live without AGOA. We only have been made to believe that AGOA is a magic wand upon whose strength we pronounce abracadabras and our economies grow. Not true. Look at our textile industry. Kenya has now overtaken Nigeria as the largest importer of second-hand clothing. And the second-hand clothing that we are using here is actually, they are dumping second-hand clothing here. Suppose we were to take a vow that we are not going, and in fact in East Africa it had been agreed that we will not import second-hand clothes. Suppose we were to take that and we say we are reviving all our textile industries. What would it do? It would mean we would be farming cotton. It would mean that we would have cotton cake for animals. It would mean that the entire value chain that is related would be revived with accompanying jobs. It would mean that we would now be making clothes for our own people, and it would grow our economies, and we would not, in fact, be exporting anything to the United States of America. We must wake up. As the young people now say, we must be woke.
And integrate, for that matter,
Absolutely.
for it to work. Very interesting. You've mentioned about Mandela and his lecture to the US back then. President Ramaphosa was in US the other day. Of course, there's a video that was shared that was not was fact-checked and was not real. But how their conversation with President Trump went, what is your take, and how do you feel about that?
I've watched that clip many times, and it evokes mixed feelings. That this Cyril Ramaphosa is the president of a country that bore the brunt of racial discrimination, still bears the brunt of racial discrimination. He is subjected to videos which are completely taken out of context. And he has to sit there like an errant high school prefect, summoned by a principal, to be told, why did you not do this? Why did you allow it to come to the attention of the principal? As an African, I feel pained. But yet there is another positive aspect to it. That in the face of that provocation, Cyril had what one may call preternatural equanimity, calmness, that allowed him to sit. And for that reason, he is to be admired. Other people would have walked out of that meeting, but he sat there. And I think it is his trade union background that made him sit through all that. But there is another question. Did he have to go? This is the question. I personally hold the view that he went too soon. I hold the view that negotiations should have been held at a lower level and only ultimately escalated to the presidential level. Remember, it was coming at a time when their ambassador had been declared persona non grata in the United States of America. So I hold the view that it should have gone slowly. Of course, somebody will say, and rightly so, that I'm speaking on hindsight, and hindsight is always perfect. But that is my feeling. But it was sad that that happened.
Why do you think, what is the interest of Trump in South Africa?
You know, South Africa is an important country in Africa. This is, depending on who you are talking to, and the fundamental that you are looking to is either Nigeria or South Africa, which is the largest economy, and the Egyptians always have something to say about that. But that is not important. What is important is that South Africa is a large economy with numerous resources, with white population, which holds the economy. A white population which has also declared that they want to create their own country in the Cape. So the interest of the United States of America and the Trump administration, as I see it, is that these are our kith and kin. And wherever they are, we are going to protect them. And we don't care about history. And that history is very recent and is still alive, as I said. You visit South Africa, you still see the vestiges of apartheid. And I hope that there will be reflection. It gladdened my heart, and it gladdened my heart that there are still a number of South Africans of white extraction who did not buy the narrative, who are able to quickly to point out that some of the footage that was being shown or the pictures that were being shown were actually taken out of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So it tells you that there is a lot of work to be done, because there are people who still think and still instinctively support apartheid South Africa. And remember that apartheid is a mental construct which is still alive and well. But we cannot, in this day and age, when we now recognize that we must have a world where, as Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe said in 1960 when he was asked about racial discrimination, he said that the only race in the world is the human race. Once we reach that level, then we will not be talking about the thing that we are talking about.
Okay, something else that stood out for me was that Elon Musk, who's of course been fighting SA for reasons, maybe wanting to have his company given license to operate and other things, of course land issues, was among the people who were to welcome Ramaphosa. What is the message in this case?
You know, the gentleman Elon Musk, from what we see, has entered into a space where he now combines money and political power. And being South African, I think it is his time to get back to these boys of the black empowerment. Remember that Cyril went into the black empowerment space immediately after the first election, and is very powerful. He's one of the richest Africans in that part of the world. And I think that Elon Musk says that now that I am Tesla, now that I am, is now called X, now that I'm in this space, I want to go back and rule the roost in my country. And in a manner of speaking, you know, appearances are very important. Both sides were very deliberate in who was brought to the table. On the side of the United States of America, you have Elon Musk, one of your own. On the side of Cyril Ramaphosa, you have some whites, the Ruto'S, and they say, yes, this is one of your own. So there was what one may describe as an intellectual pull and push. And I'm using the word intellectual very deliberately for want of a better word, but it was a tug of war of sorts. Everybody trying to demonstrate that we are in the right, with the other trying to humiliate the other one, and the other saying, you cannot humiliate me. What you are saying is not true. And Elon Musk, it would appear, is going to get what he wanted, to have Starlink alive and well in South Africa. As to who won, that the jury is still out.
Still waiting to see. Just yesterday, President Trump, of course, his Marco Rubio has said that they are going to stop funding of international students mostly. And of course, the biggest target at this moment is the Harvard University. What happens that, especially, of course, there is black and other racial students who travel to the U.S. to study? And also review of visas of the black community so that we cross-check what people share on social media.
You know, it is easy from outside to be quick to judge, but it is unfortunate, in my view, that in this day and age, we should talk about excluding anybody from seeking education anywhere. When we talked about globalization, what did it mean? It meant that I, who is in Nairobi, Kenya, should with ease study in the United States of America, study in Moscow, study in Beijing. And the United States of America is a home of immigrants. It used to be said, the land of the pilgrim's pride. almost every person, apart from the indigenous Americans, are immigrants. And to shut them out in this day and age is unfortunate. So that when you read the toing and froing, the kind of statement that are emanating from Harvard University, it started initially with the University of Columbia, now Harvard, and we now see that people's social media platforms are going to be reviewed, almost censorship. In other words, if you are a student applicant, I'm understanding this to mean we'll want to go into your Instagram page, into your X page, into your pages in the social, into your TikTok, and find out what you've said in the last 6 months. And on that basis, we shut you out. But yet, one of the things that one hears about the United States of America is freedom of speech. And I can still remember the very eloquent speech of Martin Luther King Jr. in 1963. He repeats it in 1967. He says that once I heard that there is freedom of speech in the United States of America. Of course, when there is freedom, it also comes with responsibilities. And when people don't live up to those responsibilities, you punish them in accordance with the law. My prayer and hope is that these will be revised, and that Harvard University will have the freedom that it enjoys to accommodate students from different parts of the world. It is important even for students in the United States of America.
True. What do you make of Trump's visit to Middle East, and especially a meeting in Syria, and how it affects the global politics?
You know, the Middle East, perhaps not the Middle East, but there is something happening in the Gulf. Whether one likes it or not, whether you are talking about the Emiratis, you are talking about the Omanis, you are talking about the Qataris, you are talking about the Saudis, there is something happening there. They have some emerging power that the world is being attracted. Remember that peace negotiations, whether it's between Russia and Kiev administration in Ukraine, have been held there in that part of the world. Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda have also had negotiations there. And we have seen in the recent past that I think it is the Saudis and the Qataris who paid off the debts of Syria. So what one sees, that there is also a contest there, a contest particularly in Syria. See that Syria was seen as being pro-Russia during the Bashar al-Assad administration. The new administration is now being seen as capable of being wooed to come into the American and European orbit, and they are being promised all manner of things. So those visits by several of his senior officials, including Mark Rubio, including the president himself, going to Qatar, is indicative of the reality that there is an unspoken battle of a diplomatic nature, which is designed from where I sit to ensure that Beijing and Moscow do not have influence in that region.
Does it in any way also affect what he said about the president of Russia yesterday, I think on his Truth social space, that that Trump's presence has helped him survive a lot of other things, bad things that could have happened for Moscow?
Speculation once again, and the Trump administration is just slightly over 100 days. And I think that whether you like it or not, the administration in Russia is one that has survived many things. And remember that Putin himself has been around for quite some time. So I think he's sufficiently agile to survive many things without being helped in the manner that somebody would want to say he's helped. That would be my interpretation. So it's not as straightforward that because, therefore, I think it is a lot more nuanced.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah.
Back home, before we come to the end, we have seen a lot of debate happening with the movement of the public seal from the AG's office to State House, back again from the government spokesperson saying, actually, no, it did not move, it's back in AG's office. What does the Constitution say about that? And then why would we have that confusion?
You know, first of all, it is a debate that we ought not to be having. I've seen one of my colleagues who says that it did not move. I've seen somebody saying it did not move. The public seal is a seal which is used for executing documents which are for the people of the Republic of Kenya and has been and should be resident in the office of the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya. Any attempt to deal otherwise would not be in the best interest of the people of Kenya. Of course, there is so much denial and assertions on either side, and one does not know what the actual situation is. But the reality is the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya should be the custodian of the seal for the people of the Republic of Kenya and to be utilized as guided by the representatives of the people of Kenya. And those representatives of the people of Kenya are members of parliament, to mean the National Assembly and the Senate, who, when they make law and they become law by dint of the signature of the chief executive of the Republic of Kenya, then the seal will be used as directed. In other words, the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya simply is a hand to use it for the benefit of the people of Kenya as directed by them. It is unfortunate that we even find ourselves in such debates.
Can any other lawyer use it, or it has to be signed, utilized by the AG?
Remember, the office of the Attorney General is not an individual. Sometimes we tend to individualize offices. The office of the Attorney General is an office which periodically has occupants. So let us look at the office as an institution, not individuals who come and go.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, there's a case in court about IBC and the membership. Of course, I know we can't discuss that for legal issues, but I would want to know how important, because there is something that came up that without the delimitation not happening, then we can't have an election in 2027. How important is delimitation, and does that affect, constitutionally, does it affect where we are as a country?
That is, some of these arguments that I see, and there is no shortage of people and there are no shortage of lawyers with different interpretations, as it should be. First of all, I refuse to believe that the IEBC only functions when you have commissioners. There is a secretariat, and that secretariat, I believe, has and continues to do work, and we've been paying them, even in the absence of the commissioners. So to say that no work has been going on and that work will only begin when these commissioners come in is without basis. What the commissioners will do is simply to approve the things that have been determined by the secretariat, because the commissioners are not experts in these things. It is the secretariat. And it is true to say that there are certain things that are time sensitive. But to say that we'll not have elections because the IEBC has not been properly constituted, I know Kriegler said, in the Kriegler report, he did say that it is proper that an IEBC should be properly and fully constituted at least 3 years before the elections so that they have time to prepare. That was the practical bit. And I'm also of the view that when you are dealing with an electoral body in a country whose politics is run through suspicion, the sooner they are in place, the safer. And I hope that some of these cases will be determined as a matter of priority and that the individuals will then have the opportunity to serve. We also have become a country where we litigate about everything. This idea that there will be some angels who will come and run our elections and then we'll all accept is completely misguided. And the individuals who have been taken through the mill, I heard somebody say that this and that is related to this and that. Who says that if you are related to somebody, you cannot be appointed? Once you are appointed, you become an independent commission. And it's only in Africa that these debates go on. If you go to India, you don't have these elaborate things called IEBC. You go to countries in Europe, you don't have elaborate things called IEBC. Elections are called in 1 week and you have election. But the reason why we have these difficulties is suspicion. We have a class of politicians who have been with us since the 1980s, who believe that if they don't win an election, then the election has been stolen. Even if you brought the angel himself to run those elections and those individuals lose the election, they would still say the elections are rigged. So the first thing that Kenyans must deal with is the trust question. We must begin to create institutions that we trust. It's going to take time, but that is work that we must engage in, and engage in spiritedly.
You've not addressed the issue of delimitation and why it's important, and if it's to be done, what exactly does it mean?
Delimitation simply means that if we go through the Republic of Kenya, it may be necessary by reason of increase in population in different areas to create new constituencies or to merge them. And I think there is a law that if it is made within a certain period, within a certain time limit, then that particular constituency that is created cannot be the basis of representation in the immediate election unless it was done after some time. But to me, that is not a problem. In fact, some of us hold the view that the constituencies we have should be reduced, should be merged. And let me tell you, some of these things, even if they require constitutional amendment, which amendments are legitimate, if it requires amendments to the law and those amendments are legitimate, I've been in this country, it can be done in a month. And the things that stand in the way can be removed in a month. It is not rocket science. All these things are about identifying what is in the national interest, and if we have the goodwill, they can be done. So let us not be consumed in this thing that there are impossibilities. When there is goodwill, even mountains can be moved.
Very true. Your final message, especially to Kenyans and the East African community, with regards to uniting for a better East Africa so that at the end of the day we are able to achieve a united Africa?
Without standing on any high horse, I hold the view that we as Kenyans, we as East Africans, particularly Kenyans, we must remember that we hold the chair and the secretariat of the East African community, and our words must be measured. Some of the personal ad hominem insults that I've seen circulating in the media against the President of the United Republic of Tanzania are unacceptable. We must not be a country that gives vulgarity and foul language pride of place. We can say things that are painful, but say them in a painless way. I believe we owe it to ourselves. Unfortunately today, we believe that the more vulgar one is, the more abusive one is, the more popular he or she becomes. We must exorcise the ghost of vulgarity.
Interesting. That's a very good place to end it. Thank you for watching Fanya Mambo Africa episode today. I hope you learned a thing or two. Remember to subscribe if you've not done that by now. We'll catch you on the next episode.
This is the journey to one Africa.